This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's going on, Real MVPs? Welcome to another episode of What's Your Fantasy? I'm Brandon Swanson. Across the table from me is Ricky Widmer.
What's up, guys?
And we are very excited to be back with you again here in the summer. We are doing every other week. So it feels like when I see Ricky every other week now, it feels like weeks go by in between. But it's only 1 week. Yeah. It's crazy.
It is crazy. Like, I'm so used to seeing you every single week that now when I don't see you, it's like, oh, where's Brandon? Like, my mom even asked me, she's like, have you talked to Brandon? I'm like, not as much as I used to, because I used to see you every freaking week. Now it's every other week. I can't wait for football to start so I can see you every week again.
Every week. Well, you can tell your wonderful mom, who I like very much, that I'm doing quite well, and I hope she is as well.
I will relay that message.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So we are, again, like I said, very excited to be back, ready for some great topics that we think we have lined up for you guys today. But before we get into all of that, the usual spiel. If you are looking and interested in supporting this podcast and other podcasts, head over to patreon.com, become a patron of this podcast and of MVP as a whole. Help support. $1 a month can certainly help support what we're trying to do, expanding from this studio to a new studio, which is going to help us do some new things as well. So we appreciate any and all support that we can get from all of our loyal fans, viewers, listeners, etc.
Well, and for as low as $1, is the reason why I hit the mic a little bit to get my phone out. You could be right here if you're on YouTube. I'm showing you could be in our Discord server talking to us and the other patrons. Like today, Jake, I'll give you a little bit of an insider. Not from State Farm, from Philly.
We should get him.
Jake Neverman, who's one of our patrons, said today, hey guys, quick heads up. Today is day 122 to remind you that the Saints got screwed. Where my reply was a picture of the Minnesota Miracle of Stephon Diggs making the catch over the Saints defenders, where he then tried to make fun of Kirk Cousins. And I had to defend my boy because rightfully so, Kirk Cousins is my boy. And as T.O. would say, that's my quarterback. That's my quarterback, Brandon, my quarterback. So a little bit of insight of what kind of a conversation you could be in for as low as $1.
Well, we'll see if your quarterback's going to ever be able to win Minnesota's Super Bowl.
We'll see.
Many doubters. But we are going to dive right into things, and actually it's going to start with a little bit of football. I know it is baseball season, but football also never ends. But the football topic that we wanted to talk about today was Todd Gurley. And
Todd.
everything surrounding Todd Gurley is, how is that knee? Sean McVay, head coach for the Rams, says he's good. He's good to go. We're ready for him to take on a full workload for the entire 2019 season. But let's be honest, no one believes that, at least not right now, because of what we saw at the end of last season, what Todd Gurley did in the playoff games and certainly in the Super Bowl. His usage was really not good. And C.J. Anderson got a lot of carries, and there's no way that you do not give the rock to your number one and possibly the number one guy, Todd Gurley, if he's not hurt. So, Ricky, this was a guy that I had on my fantasy team, and he was an outstanding player. I mean, he was getting solidly 25 to 35 points per week. And this is a guy who his stats, 256 carries, over 1,200 yards, 17 touchdowns on the ground, chipped in another 800 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns through the air. This is an outstanding player. So for Todd Gurley to have some problems, to have knee issues, still a fairly young guy, that is not good. Ricky, my question to you, if you're a Todd Gurley owner, should you worry to the point of possibly trying to trade Todd Gurley and give up on him and try and sell high while you can instead of going into a season where you may have multiple problems week in, week out.
Well, the thing is, first off, it's a sticky situation because of two things. Number one, yes, if he's going to be the Todd Gurley that we saw after the bye, I don't want him. I know he had a 29-point game in a PPR league, because I'm looking at the fantasy scoring for MVP. He had 29 PPR points against Detroit and 42 against Philly. But in the other three games, and I know the last two, people are going to say, well, Ricky didn't have a touch, so he can't score points in those last two games. The other game was Chicago, where he got a 6 points. So for me, it's like you're at the double-edged sword of, do you trade him and risk the possibility of him being healthy and going off at the beginning of the year, just last year kind of being a fluke, or do you keep him and risk him hurting your team if he does continue to be the Todd Gurley from the end of last year? Because the end of last year, no one knew what it was. People thought it was the knee. Then we thought he had the yips. Then we just thought it was Sean McVay not wanting to play Todd Gurley. Like, we didn't know what it was. Like, that Kansas City game, Brandon, I remember shouting at my TV and shouting, and I'm going to be very expletive here. I was basically like, Todd Gurley, you're fucking me. You're fucking me right now. And that was it, because I lost by like 2 points that week. And all I needed was Todd Gurley to get a little bit more than 9 points. And he couldn't even get it. So for me, I might be on the fence of trying to make a deal. But the other question to that is, because of last year, who's gonna wanna send the farm for Todd Gurley? Like, what kind of an offer are you gonna get for Todd based off of how he ended last year?
So it all really depends on what type of league you're in. Mm-hmm. Because if you only have, let's say, like one of my leagues I'm in has 2 keepers. Yeah. You can't send a farm, but you could trade straight up for, like,
you know what I mean? Like, what are you going to get back for him?
Well, Todd Gurley, I mean, if someone really wants Todd Gurley, and they're someone who maybe came off a season where, gosh, their running backs were just awful, they'll take Todd Gurley. And you could probably, if they've got a solid wide receiver or a number 1 tight end or whatever, I mean, you could definitely probably get that off of them. But if you're in, now one of my other leagues, it's a dynasty league, and we have 8 keepers. If you're giving up Todd Gurley, you're probably going to have to, on the other side, send 2 to 3 no worse than solid players.
See, and that's the thing where I wonder if there are going to be enough people that feel comfortable sending that over, because it's each person, the trader and the tradee, are making the same risk. Like, if you're getting Todd Gurley, your risk is he may not be the Todd Gurley that he started off last year. But if you trade him, you're risking him being the Todd Gurley that he is. Because even though he, in the last, 4 games of the season, got a total of 30 fantasy points, he still finished as the number 1 running back in fantasy last year. And the thing that blows my mind, and I don't know if this is the experts or the analysts kind of being cautious with this, but I look at, so the ESPN fantasy guys and girls did a mock draft. And if you look at their first round, the first 6 players off the board were running backs. Not a single one was Todd Gurley. The first one was Saquon Barkley. The second one was Ezekiel Elliott. Then you had Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, Melvin Gordon, David Johnson, which these guys last year, so Saquon was 2, Zeke was 5. Let's see, Christian McCaffrey was 3 last year, so we're still in the top 10. Kamara 4, Gordon 6, and then Johnson was 10. So all these guys various in the top 10. But the thing that even blows my mind too is, let's say in your league, you don't have a league like the MVP league where it's chaos and it's just a random hosh-posh of just whatever Mark wants to throw our way, as our commissioner, Mark Weber. But I mean, if you're in a standard draft, if the first 6, and I threw this question, I think 2 weeks ago, if the first 6 people go, usually running back's the first position I go to. If you're not in a keeper league, Todd Gurley is also going to run into the fantasy problem of, if let's say you're the 7th pick, all right, at that point, do I take Todd Gurley or do I just say, fuck it, I'm going to take DeAndre Hopkins instead and lock down my wide receiver? Because like that's a point, if you're in a like 12 to 14 person league, at 7, it's like, I could take Todd Gurley, take that risk, or I can go wide receiver, go DeAndre Hopkins, and just be set, because he was the number 1 wide receiver and I believe didn't have a drop last year at all. So it's interesting to me with this one, the 6 guys that went before Todd Gurley running back wise, and Barkley, Elliott, McCaffrey, Kamara, Gordon, and Johnson.
Well, of what I looked at, Todd Gurley right now is averaging about the number 9 spot for running backs. That's not good for a guy who a year ago was number 1. A lot of people had him number 1, number 2, number 3. I mean, right around in there.
And the next 3, if you're going to go, if I'm going to use the ESPN as kind of the basis for this, the next 3 running backs that would have been after Gurley, if let's say Gurley slid to the 9th or even the 10th running back. So after Gurley, the 8th running back was Le'Veon Bell. He went 10th overall. Then James Conner went 12th overall. And then Joe Mixon was the 10th running back at 13th overall. So really any one of those 3 guys, if you feel more comfortable in a Le'Veon with Adam Gase, if you feel more comfortable with James Conner, because now we don't have the question of Le'Veon with James Conner, but James Conner was also a guy who in his last, 4 games, he had 0 points for 3 of them because he was out with injury in those games. And then his last game against Cincinnati, he only had 9 points in that game. So it's like James Conner is almost the same question to me as Todd Gurley. Yes, he had a great start to last year, but injury kind of had him sputter out, where I feel like Le'Veon coming back, well, Le'Veon hasn't played in a full year, so what are we going to expect from Le'Veon? To me, the question is, does Joe Mixon jump a Todd Gurley to be the 7th running back off the board?
So Joe Mixon also had some injuries last year as well. His were earlier in the season, and he was able to shake that, and he came off, and he ended pretty strong, I thought.
He was the 9th ranked
his
running
season.
back.
Yeah, he was solid. And Joe Mixon's looking to get an even bigger workload this next season. So Joe Mixon, I could definitely see a healthy Joe Mixon could certainly be jumping a Todd Gurley right now, that obviously other people and other fantasy experts certainly don't agree with what Todd McVay is saying, because otherwise they would have him in the top 5. There'd be no reason why you wouldn't.
Yeah.
Because Todd Gurley, if healthy, would be someone you want in your top 5 and would put there, I think, even with his end to last season, if you knew he was fully healthy. But I don't think anyone does. That's the problem. And that's also another reason why, if you're a Todd Gurley owner, it could be hard to move him if other people are thinking the same way you are.
You're talking dynasty.
I'm talking
Gurley.
Dynasty. Or even if you have like you keep 2 keepers
league.
or 3 keepers or whatever, other people may be looking at that and be like, why do you want to move Todd Gurley? There's a reason you want to move Todd Gurley. Usually it's because you have a fear one way or another.
Yeah.
Because people don't just move guys like Todd Gurley. But it may be difficult to ship him off to another fantasy squad at this point right now.
And I mean, the thing that's also going to play into it too is it depends on what other players you get. So if I'm bringing up the DeAndre Hopkins thing. If I can get DeAndre Hopkins at 7 and then have 2 reliable running backs, like let's say last year, let's say I get like a Nick Chubb or like a Nick Chubb, Dalvin Cook, and a Sony Michel, even like a Devonta Freeman. It's like, okay, these are guys that, maybe not Devonta Freeman because he was injured last year, but people like the year before, but like Sony Michel, Nick Chubb, Dalvin Cook, these are not guys that are going to go in the first round, but if I can get them round 2, round 3, and have a strong arm wide receiver, you may have to do that this year if you're in, let's say, the middle of your draft, of your snake draft, because those running backs are probably going to go like hotcakes 1 through 6.
Oh, yeah.
And the question is, will Todd Gurley be one of them? I don't know if he will.
Yeah, there is still a lot to be figured out with Todd Gurley, and we will certainly find that out over the next coming weeks and coming months, and seeing what happens at OTAs, and then all the off-season workout programs and everything like that, and certainly when they start getting into the mini camps and all of that, it'll be interesting to see if Todd Gurley is out there. Is he participating? How does he look? How does he feel? We're going to get a real good sense of what Todd Gurley is doing, how he's feeling in the next coming months. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I am even this year, like last year I got lucky with our cacophony and how crazy our draft is. My main 2 running backs were Todd Gurley and Melvin Gordon. So I was locked down until Melvin Gordon got injured for about 3 games. Then Todd Gurley had the end of the year. That's when everything kind of fell off the rails for me.
And it was one last game, wasn't it? With didn't you need a kicker?
Yeah, well,
or you were going against a kicker or something?
That was the Houston game. The Houston game where they went into overtime. I needed their kicker to make a kick, and they didn't. I don't think it was something like that. Like I needed Houston's kicker to make one more kick, and they didn't do it. It was the Houston Tennessee game, I want to say.
Yeah.
It was a Monday Night Football game, but I'd have to look it up. Because now you're bringing back old wounds. Like I'm going to start talking about Ted Ginn again in that drop that I talked about 2 weeks ago.
Well, the worst wound is probably the fact that I got in and I probably had no business getting in, and I got in front of you, and I ended up getting second place.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I was none too happy. But I'm a former league champion, so at least I can say that.
And I last two years had an opportunity to win it all, and I have lost both times. I'm like the Dodgers.
And I will say that year I won it, probably the best year ever, because that was the year I had Jimmy Graham to start the year, and Dave and I, one of our many dinners, were sitting down, had a nice fantasy discussion, and I was like, you know what? Jimmy Graham could be on the table if you're going to offer said Rob Gronkowski, now retired Rob Gronkowski. And we made the deal. I sent Jimmy Graham over to Dave. This was when Jimmy Graham was still on the Saints. And then as Dave says to this day, he would have never made that trade if he knew Jimmy Graham slept with Drew Brees' wife, because Drew Brees just stopped throwing to Jimmy Graham. And I rode Rob Gronkowski all the way to the championship. And Gronk, if you're horny, won our fantasy league that year.
I don't remember Jimmy Graham ever having a bad time in New Orleans.
It was that very last year before he went to Seattle. Well, it was the year he got traded to Seattle because, he did not have a good year, and Dave was just furious that he made that trade because it was at a time where Dave was above me, and it tanked Dave's season, and Gronk skyrocketed my season, obviously, because I won it all.
That's how it goes. That is how it goes.
Sometimes it just takes one deal to just turn a season around.
It's true. We've seen it. We've seen it in real life. So next topic here. Moving on to the next one. Keeping it with football.
Another guy who was on my fantasy team in the MVP league last year.
We are going to look at the new number 1 wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers, JuJu Smith-Schuster, who right now is being ranked where I've seen right around number 5. And Ricky, my question to you on this, we've seen how good JuJu Smith-Schuster is, but that's always been JuJu Smith-Schuster
number 2
with Antonio Brown on the other side. So now there is no Antonio Brown on the other side. He's with the Oakland Raiders. God bless him. And it's now all JuJu as the number 1 guy. Will JuJu Smith-Schuster, Ricky, in your mind, in your opinion, end up a top 5 fantasy wide receiver at the end of the season?
Now, my gut wants to say yes. And the reason why my gut wants to say yes is if you look at it, Julio Jones was the number 5 receiver in fantasy last year. He had 213 fantasy points. If you look at JuJu, he was ninth at 186. The difference between them, about 200 give or take yards and a touchdown. That is the only thing between them. And if you look at the stats from last year, you had, let's see, let me pull up the receiving. I'm going to just look at the targets. The thing that's interesting, though, is Antonio Brown last year, 168 targets, had 1,297 yards and 15 touchdowns. JuJu had 116 or 166, so only 2 less than Antonio Brown, but had about almost 200 more yards, but 8 less touchdowns. My question for JuJu this year, and this is with the Steelers in general, is without Antonio Brown there, I don't know how many additional targets that JuJu gets, because still 166, like, as the number 2, you were rivaling your own number 1 last year. I know there were problems with Antonio Brown, and his just personality on that team. But when you look at it, Antonio Brown is a guy the last 2 years has had 163, 168. My 2 questions for JuJu Smith is, are you going to stay around that? Are you going to have the, 2015 season, Antonio Brown had 193 targets. Are you going to be around there where it's in the 180s, 190s? And the bigger question is, are you going to be that double-digit touchdown guy? Because if he gets more targets, if he gets, let's say, 20 more targets and adds those touchdowns that Antonio Brown had, then you're damn sure he'll be a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy this year.
So JuJu Smith-Schuster, he doesn't have many people rivaling him right now for targets.
Yeah.
So there's James Washington,
who up and coming, I know, 2nd-year player.
Ryan Switzer. And Eli Rogers, I think, from a wide receiver standpoint, and then Vance McDonald at the tight end position. So honestly, I understand the Pittsburgh Steelers have always been good at grooming wide receivers, going back to Santonio Holmes, and then, of course, Antonio Brown, JuJu. But there is really, outside of maybe James Washington, because I think he's a good target, and I do think he's a good wide receiver, JuJu should still have around the same numbers, except I think his touchdown totals should go up.
Yeah, I think that now that I'm looking into it, I'm going to say JuJu gets, I'm going to say between 25 and 30 more targets this year. I think he'll be between I'll say he'll be between 180 and 200 targets this year. I don't think he hits 200 targets, but he should be within that range. And the reason why I say that is 2 things. I'm looking back to that, what was that, 2015? Yeah, 2015 Steeler team. This is a team that was 2nd in the North at 10-6 that year, and they went to the playoffs, beat the Bengals in the first round by 2. Of course, the Bengals always win. And then I believe that was the game that they went into Denver. No, they played Denver at home. That was the 13-4 Broncos team with Peyton Manning, I believe, that just wiped the floor with them. Yeah, Peyton Manning that year, or that game, had 0 touchdowns, but the Broncos won 23-16 in Denver. So that was when they were going for their Super Bowl. But the more important thing to that is the running back for the Steelers that year was D'Angelo Williams, because Le'Veon only played 6 games that year. So this year, you got to look at it. James Conner's your guy. Le'Veon's not here. So a similar situation almost to that year, because if you go back to 2014, when Le'Veon played the whole year, Le'Veon had 105 targets in the receiving game that year. So without Le'Veon, that's going to take away some targets for someone else. Then if you look at the receivers that were also in that backfield, you had Antonio Brown had 193. The second guy was Martavius Bryant with 92. You had Martavius Bryant, Heath Miller at 81. You had Marcus Wheaton at 79. D'Angelo Williams at 47. Darius Hayward-Bay at 39. Le'Veon Bell in his 6 games had 26. Jesse James had 11. And then a sprinkling of guys with 4, 3, 2, and 1. With the receivers that you named, we could see a similar season to that from the Steelers, because James Conner to me is not a guy that's going to get 100 plus receptions out of the backfield. Like, he might be in the D'Angelo Williams, like maybe 40 to 60 targets this year. But other than that, it's like, what other receiver is going to rival him for targets? Who's going to do it? So they're going to go to JuJu, whether he's doubled or not. And I could easily see a 180, 190 target season for JuJu Smith this year. The only question that remains is, like you said, is he going to get those touchdowns? Because like Antonio Brown in that year had 10 touchdowns.
I think when we come to the end of the season and all the stats are in, I think JuJu's going to end up a top 10 wide receiver. I think that should be... Because he was top 10 this year.
I
think that will be very simple. But I don't know if he will crack top 5. I don't know if he will crack top 5. We'll see. We'll see how the Steelers are. I know a lot of people are still very high on the Steelers. Think that
that's another thing.
A lot of
how
people,
are the Steelers going to be as a team?
A lot of people still believe the Steelers will win that division. A lot of people have moved over to the Browns and said it's going to be the Cleveland Browns. We know it's not the Bengals.
Could be the Ravens.
And it could be the Ravens. You just assume it's not going to be Cincinnati. But new head coach, things could change. But right now, I think Cleveland's the favorite. I think Pittsburgh's number 2, close. And then I think that the Ravens will be 3, could rival for 2, and Cincinnati's 4. But it all depends on how Pittsburgh fares. Does James Conner come back, and is he similar to James Conner beginning of last year, James Conner?
Or
if he is not, if he's end of the year James Conner, you've got problems. How does the development of their younger wide receivers go? Is James Washington going to step up and take the JuJu Smith-Schuster role that JuJu held for the last couple of years, while JuJu stands in as the Antonio Brown, now the Antonio Brown of that team? But no, excuse me, now the JuJu Smith-Schuster number 1 of that team. He is his own man. But how does James Washington do? Does Eli Rogers step up? Does Ryan Switzer, he started to get a little bit of an expanded role last year. They tried to make him the Wes Welker, Julian Edelman of the Steelers, which, worked a little bit. But he's going to have to get better. And then is JuJu going to have a ton of pressure on him? Is he going to get multiple double teams? He will. How is he going to be able to handle that? So a lot of questions. I think JuJu is extremely talented. I think he'll be able to do extremely well. I just don't know if he will be top 5 well.
Yeah, I'm going to go with... There's one thing I'm going to look up before I give my final answer on it. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm going to say he is. And the reason why is I'm going to go back to what I said. I think he's going to get between 180 and 200 targets. No more than 200, but he's going to be at least 181. So he'll surpass that 180.
181 targets.
Yeah, on the season. The big question is the touchdown numbers. How many is he going to get? He's got to get more touchdowns. He's got to get in the end zone to be a top 10 fantasy wide receiver, because even if I look at it, I'm going to pull it up right now, have not even prepped this, but I'm for sure that I'm going to be right, so I'm going to do it anyways. Let me find that mock draft that I was looking at just moments ago. So JuJu in the ESPN was the 7th wide receiver taken. The number 1 wide receiver taken, DeAndre Hopkins, had a total of 11 touchdowns last year, double digits. Devonta Adams, number 2, 13 touchdowns last year. Julio Jones, I already said he had 8, so he was under the double-digit mark. Then Michael Thomas, 9 touchdowns. He flirted with it, but still underneath that 9 touchdowns. Michael Thomas also had just over 1,400 yards last year. Was right above JuJu for the 8th one.
It also took Michael Thomas like 4 games to catch his first touchdown.
True. And then OBJ, it says 6 touchdowns last year for OBJ, but new team, playing the whole year. We'll see how he does. Then Antonio Brown, who I said had 15. He was the number 2 wideout last year. And then JuJu. And then the 3 guys after him, Keenan Allen.
Keenan Thompson, he is really great on SNL, but is he also playing?
He'd be more of a tight end. He's got the body of a tight end.
Love Keenan Thompson.
Allen had 6 touchdowns last year. Mike Evans, or Mevins, who Brandon was like, why didn't you pick him last year? Well, I had other plans in mind, Brandon. He had 8 touchdowns last year. And then the guy we did pick over Mevins, Adam Thielen, had 9
Does everyone
touchdowns.
Call him that or just you?
No, just me. Like, I saw it once
hey,
and I
Mevins.
loved it.
How you doing, buddy? Mevins.
People call him Mevins, like M. Evans, Mevins, Mike Evans, Thielen. I got some funky names for folks.
Not you.
But I will say JuJu is going to be a top 5 receiver this year. The other question I'll throw in, these are the teams that they're going to have to play, Brandon. The Patriots, the Seahawks, 49ers, Bengals twice, Ravens twice, the Chargers, the Dolphins, the Colts, the Rams, the Browns twice, the Cardinals, the Bills, the Jets. And then that's all the opponents they have this year. So how many of those are going to be wide receiver stoppers in their secondary? That will remain to be seen as well.
Ricky, we're at a point right now where it's one of those. It is definitely a wait and see, because expectations certainly high, I think, for JuJu.
Do you buy the chemistry thing with what the news was this week, that Big Ben took the wide receivers in? They were hanging out at his house and having a little barbecue, and then Antonio Brown was like, hey, don't trust that man, guys. He is not a man to be trusted. Do you believe JuJu when he says the chemistry is a lot better with the Steelers, more importantly, the wide receiver room?
Yeah, I do. I believe him, but I also, while maybe he's trying to take a knock and a shot at Antonio Brown, at the same time, possibly, maybe Big Ben is just trying to go out of his way and be better. And maybe he's seen, okay, here's some things that I could have done better even when Antonio was here. But also, a lot of these wide receivers right now, they're younger guys. Ben needs to take them under his wing. That's not necessarily what I mean. He needs to bring them in and try and make the chemistry as good as possible. That, so that they're on the same page and that they're honestly strong on and off the field. I think that's going to be the biggest thing. You could see on the field how off-field problems really got on the field for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It was so apparent this past season. It was bad. It was really bad. But I think to hear things like that, like Ben going and saying, okay, guys, let's hang out. Let's bring it together. All this type of stuff. It's good. That's positive. That's only going to help them all in the long run, I think. So I believe that things will be much better this next season. And hopefully that's a mixture of Ben, doing a little bit more on his part, the young guys putting in a lot of work on their part, and probably Antonio Brown and his ego not being there anymore either. Here's
the other thing I am going to throw out here, and this will be the last thing I throw out there, is there's some guys that were taken under JuJu in this mock draft that could move themselves up into the top 10, which could shake things up. The first one's A.J. Green. If A.J. Green's not injured like he was last year, A.J. Green's a top 10 fantasy wide receiver.
Yes,
he was 37th because he was injured for the whole end of the year.
Yep.
So that's one guy to look at. Another guy to look at, and I know he wasn't super far off from his best receiving year, But you also got to look at T.Y. Hilton. Like, now that they have Paris Campbell in that game, like, I feel like this is touchdowns. He was on track, didn't have as many yards. T.Y. Hilton, what kind of a wide receiver is he? Is he going to get more touchdowns? The most touchdowns he's ever had in a season for Indy is 7. The thing is with him, is he going to ever be a double-digit touchdown guy for that team with Andrew Luck? So those are just two guys that I'm looking at. I mean, Stephon Diggs, too. If Thielen falls off, you're expecting Diggs to take over. And Diggs, end of the year, had a very pedestrian end of the year because you had Adam Thielen going off for the Vikings, and Kirk Cousins didn't play too well at the end of the year, which also played into the wide receiver support as well.
But he's still your quarterback.
Hey, he's my quarterback. I gotta support my guy, man. Gotta support my quarterback. He's my quarterback. My quarterback.
Well, there you have it. I'm really excited for football. Certainly with Todd Gurley and JuJu, seeing how things shake out with both of their teams and with their individual performances this year. We have just a couple of months to wait and see what happens as football gets started in September, when they actually start playing the real games, as opposed to those
fake ones?
first four stupid games.
Those faux football games?
That they have to play. Yes, those faux football games. Now, moving into our final topic, it's our lone baseball topic this week. And we are talking about...
Before we do, can I give a fantasy update since we're moving into baseball?
Yes, I should have started with that. I forgot.
So
I would love you to give us an update. Nothing has changed.
It's very short. And if you're on YouTube, you get the extra added. Hey, guys, it's nice to see you from up here. Yeah, we're at 84 points. Second place is at 56 points. King of the mountaintop. No one's touched us. Like, Javi Baez got injured and was like, hey, don't worry, Ricky. I'm coming in for this one. Going to give you an RBI. Hope you liked it. I did like it, Javi. Thank you for the support. But, yeah, we're king of the mountaintop. Like, yes, I know today we're not doing so hot. We're technically -2, so we were at 86 coming into the day. We're 84 as we're recording this. Don't worry. 84, 58 is second place. We're fine. We're not falling. King of the mountaintops. What's your fantasy?
Nothing's changed.
It's just easy. I haven't made a move in weeks. I haven't made an actual free agent move in weeks. I've just been all I have to do in the morning is, all right, what pitchers are in? That's it. I didn't even touch our main lineup, which I will say, the one thing we had to deal with for a little bit, Brandon, is both Tatis Jr. and I think it's Anthony Rendon. They got injured. They were both on the 10-day injured reserve. So we had to kind of manage through that, but now it's Tatis is still injured. He's on our IL. D. Gordon is now injured.
Yes, he is.
But they're just riding our bench. We're just letting the other guys play. We're just letting them play.
And they are playing very well.
The only thing
no one's touching us.
The only thing is, how long is Javi going to be out? He is missing the game today. No, they're not playing today. So he gets an off day today. No, he is missing the game today. He is missing the game today. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes. But we're fine. We got Jason Hayward, so we're fine too. We're fine.
We'll be okay. We'll be okay.
We're not panicking. We're still
relax.
We're still sipping our mimosas, having a good time.
I think we'll be able to continue to do that for quite some time here.
Mm-hmm. Well, until someone decides to challenge us.
So our final topic that we want to talk about is the New York Yankees, and specifically some of the players on this team. So the New York Yankees, it's just incredible. Coming into today, 30-17, 2 games up in the East over the Tampa Bay Rays. Now, this Yankees team is a team where almost everyone is injured. Miguel Andujar, out until 2020. Dellin Betances, out until June. Greg Bird, to be decided when he comes back. Jacoby Ellsbury, don't know when he's coming back. Didi Gregorius
hasn't even taken a net bat this year.
June, July, maybe. Aaron Judge, don't know. Jordan Montgomery, July. James Paxton, hopefully late May. Luis Severino, second half, maybe. Giancarlo Stanton, to be decided. He was making progress, but now they've shut him down 7 to 10 days. Stanton this season, 3 games, 250 batting average, no homers, no RBIs, nothing. Troy Tulowitzki, May, June, sometime late May, June, hopefully. This is incredible. First, I just want to say incredible how many players and how many important players on both sides of offense, pitching, hitting. Incredible how many guys are out. And then the Yankees are still 30-17, leading their division. But it helps when you play Baltimore multiple times. But, Ricky, not only did I want to bring up that with the Yankees, but also that's a great thing for the Yankees that they're winning their division. But how about for fantasy owners, though, who have, or maybe who had a Miguel Andujar as a young guy who was really coming on to the scene. Now he's out till next year. Or how about Aaron Judge? Not sure when he's coming. How about Giancarlo Stanton? Not sure when he's coming. James Paxton, who was a guy, Seattle last season, very good, comes to the Yankees, still very good. Now he's, coming late May, they hope. Or a Gregorius. Or a Dylan Betances as a reliever. What do you do in these situations?
Well, I'll put it this way, and this is how big this one is if you look at 2 of the teams in the MVP league, Kyle Rudier, I think I would say it, Ruder. Kyle basically
first I thought you were going to say Kyle Rudolph. I was going to say the tight end for Minnesota.
Apparently, ongoing talks about a 5-year deal.
Yes, I heard that.
Don't know how I feel about that because we drafted Irv Smith Jr., thinking that he wasn't going to come back. But to baseball, like Kyle, he's at Aaron Judge and Stanton. He's 8 out of 9 in our league. He's in 8th place. Then you look at the Pickle Rick Dongs, who are in 9th. He's got Aaron Hicks. And then help me out with the name, Miguel Andujar. He's got both of them. He's in 9th. So, I mean, that is the kind of stress that is putting on fantasy owners, especially at Kyle. I'm assuming Kyle entering the season was thinking, I've got Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton. I am going to be in fine condition this year. Well, Stanton's only taken 8 at-bats this year. 1 run, batting about 250, so he hasn't helped your team much. And then Aaron Judge, only 5 home runs. Yes, he's had runs and RBIs, but if they're not playing, they're hurting you. Because if they're not playing, they're not getting you these key stats for your team. Or if you're in a points-based league, they're not getting you points. So, I mean, I'm almost at the point of like, I haven't even looked the Yankees' way, except for I think we've got one of their pitchers. That's it. Like, we've got one pitcher from the Yankees, and besides that, it's just like, hey, stay away, because the positional side, if they're injured, obviously they're not going to help you, and you can find other guys to fill holes to help you better than the backup Yankees that are taking the injured Yankees spots.
Well, I'll tell you what, though, is you look at other guys for the Yankees, like Gleyber Torres, who is playing pretty well. Then you also look at Gary Sanchez, who's playing pretty well. So far this season, let's see, Gleyber Torres has 52 hits this season for the Yankees, batting at .299. 26 runs, 24 RBIs. I don't understand why it's not showing home runs.
He's got 10
but he has
home
10
runs.
home runs. Okay, there we are. 10 home runs.
Yeah, 26, 10, 24.
875 OPS. He's certainly doing well for you. And then Gary Sanchez, who was also hurt a little bit, is a guy who has so much power. And when he's been in games and he's been playing, he too is hitting the ball pretty well. So there are guys on the Yankees team that you certainly want to have in your lineup, like Gary Sanchez, 14 home runs on the season and 30 RBIs. He's batting at .263, runs scored 19, 31 hits. I mean, this is a guy that is hitting very well. Mm-hmm. So when you have...
How many home runs does he have?
He has 14.
What's his average?
263.
Okay. So I was just going to throw this one out to that. You're talking about Torres, right?
Gary Sanchez.
Okay. What about Torres's?
Gleyber Torres was, 11 and 24? And he was batting 299?
Like, for example, and this is a guy...
10 and 24 batting 299.
This is a guy that's owned in just shy of 52% of fantasy leagues. I know he's an outfielder, but, like, I could go to free agency in our league, pick up a guy like Franmil Reyes, who 21 runs, 15 home runs, 27 ribbies, batting about 252. Not the same average, but he's giving me more home runs than Gleyber Torres. So if I'm looking at other areas, another area that I will say, I was looking at Wade and Gardner for that team because they have about 5 stolen bases this year. I was almost like, hey, I can go pick up them because they can help out with stolen bases. Or you can pick up a guy that's only picked up in 10% of fantasy leagues that I might pick up for our team with the injuries. Draw Dyson. I just found out this right now during this podcast. 23 runs for Dyson. Only 3 home runs because he's not a power hitter. 11 ribbies, but he's batting 267, and he's got 12 stolen bases on the year. I might pick him up right now as we are talking and drop somebody. That's what I may do. Just because I found this gem while we were recording.
I guess I just think you look at the Yankees and you think, okay, if these guys who are in there right now Gary Sanchez had this season when he's played the Orioles and Gleyber Torres, they have just dominated them. That's where they've gotten half of their home runs. You think if a Judge or a Stanton is in there, they'd be doing the same, if not more. So that's what you're missing out on right now if you're those guys. But also like a James Paxton right now. I know that he just was put on the 10-day IL, I think sometime last week, maybe the week before. But that's a guy who can certainly bring you strikeouts, and that's what you're missing in him. And if you are in, and I understand it's a 162-game season, and we're still early on. We're only at about game 50, couple games shy of that. But that's tough. I mean, games lost now, from a fantasy perspective, I mean,
eventually,
that's tough. Or points that you could be grasping with those guys in there. That's
like with
tough.
Roto, you just got to start digging yourself out of the hole. And that's the whole thing. Like, you've got to start, for example, like Kyle and Pickle Rick Dongs in our league. You got to start digging yourself out of that hole now. And it's almost like, well, of course, is it Andujar? Is that how you say?
Andujar, yeah.
Andujar. Obviously, you're not going to play him because he's out for the entire year. Won't be back until 2020. But it's just, you got to find other options. And if you drafted Yankees, you're hitting the waiver wire and you're looking for guys that, hey, you know what? This wasn't the guy that I expected to have a good season, but he's doing this one thing really well, and I need that. Like for us, we were down in Ks. We were terrible in Ks pitching. I went up and I picked up Max Fried. I picked up Caleb Smith. I picked up Domingo Herman. I picked up guys like Matthew Boyd and Him Jin Ryu. And I was like, okay, these are guys that I targeted for strikeouts that aren't going to completely tank our other stats, but are going to get us strikeouts. And now we're fairly good in our pitching. So it's like, if you have a Yankee, it's not over yet. The season is still young. You just got to hit the waiver wire and find those diamonds in the rough to help you boost up those stats before it's too late. Because like what happened in the basketball league we were in for the fast break is the longer you wait on it, let's say like an Aaron Judge, you're like, oh, he's going to come back. I'm not saying drop Aaron Judge, but the more games you sit there waiting for him to come back, you'll be in a situation like we were in basketball where we were second place, points behind, like a point behind the top team. I think it was Kyle, who is now in 8th in the baseball league. And we were like, great, we can't do it because we were so far back of the next person above us in each category to where we couldn't make a move up. And you don't want to be in that situation come late September.
Yeah, no, you don't want to you don't want to tie your hands now. Certainly.
Yeah, don't put them behind the back yet.
No, you don't want to do that, but you also want to be
Baker Mayfield, run from those cops. Who cares if you get tackled?
you want to be strategic about any moves that you can make, and certainly don't. But that's all the point of and the hard part of fantasy, and that's what is going to, kind of weed out the really good owners from the ones who aren't willing to make the decisions at the right times. And it's all about timing. If you wait too long, you could screw yourself. If you move too quick, you could screw yourself. So it's luck, it's timing, it's all those things. But it's also, it's very much watching the waiver wire. It's very much watching the games and or watching MLB Network or whatever it is, ESPN, to check in and see how guys actually look and who's injured, who's hot, who's trending up, who's trending down. And again, keeping an eye on that waiver wire. And when it comes to baseball, that's every single day.
Yeah, and I mean, that's it. And it's like, I look at our team, and it's like Narvaez wasn't drafted. Vogelbach wasn't drafted. Franco wasn't drafted. Marte wasn't drafted. Jason Hayward, not drafted. Alex Gordon was not drafted, added in free agency. Gerard Dyson now, added in free agency. I look at our pitchers. You've got Sean Green was drafted? Nope, added in free agency. So Sean Green, Greg Holland, Ryu, Boyd, Smith, Herman, all those guys added in free agency. It's all about hitting the waiver wire and finding those guys like I just did in Gerard Dyson, who I hope can add some stolen bases to our team because I don't think we're that bad in stolen bases, but I want to be the best. Yeah, we are lowest in stolen bases. So we are 8-8 in runs and home runs, 9 in average and ribbies, 7 in stolen bases. So we're technically in third place in stolen bases. We need to up that. We're pitching 9s across the board except for saves, but we only got 2 relievers, so I'm not too worried about that. We got Jansen and Holland are our two relievers locking down our saves.
I think we're doing okay.
I think we're doing great. I'm surprised in myself that we're this high. Because I told you the story about this was when Adam Dunn was on the White Sox. I went straight pitching to start, won all the pitching stats, and then won stolen bases, and that's how I won the league.
And you were not asked back.
No, I was not, because they thought they thought I didn't take it serious enough. I didn't have the respect for the league, Brandon.
Well, when you win the league
was a joke.
I'd say that you took it serious when you win the league.
I took it serious. They just didn't like how I made their league a gimmick. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like if a Wildcat team won the Super Bowl the year the Dolphins did the Wildcat. If they would have won the Super Bowl, people would have been like, why the hell does this Wildcat win in the Super Bowl? Or if Tim Tebow would have won the Super Bowl, people would have been like Herm Edwards, the Frank Caliendo bit. If he's like, Tim Tebow, good player, great player, good player. Can't play quarterback, though. It's like that. Like, if Tim Tebow would have won the Super Bowl, that's what it would be like. I was a gimmick. That's what I was, but I won the league.
Good for you, man. Good for you.
Hey, sometimes you just got to sit there and pat yourself on the back because no one else is going to do it.
Well, Ricky, any final thoughts on anything today?
We should put that on a shirt. Pat yourself on the back because nobody else is going to do it.
Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. And then just a big old, high five on your back.
On the back?
Yeah, like someone's patting you on the back.
Or 5-star, yeah.
Yeah, or you put the hand right here because that's
all you can reach?
That's as far as you'd be able to reach for your back. I don't know how far you could reach. You can reach a little further than I can, but it's still the back of the shoulder. But no, that's all I've got.
I was just saying, I think we're done. That'll wrap it. That'll wrap it for today. But again, thank you so much for watching, and thank you for listening. Thanks for tuning in as always. We enjoy doing this. We brought you some football. We brought you some baseball. A little best of both worlds this week, which is what we've been doing the last couple of weeks, which we've been rolling with, and we enjoy it.
Were you trying to put a little Boston on that? It sounded like you were trying to change your accent a little bit.
No.
On that little bit of football, a little bit of basketball. I don't know if that was Boston, but it could have been a little New York kind of a spin on it.
I have no idea. I wasn't even trying to do anything.
Sounded like you were changing your inflection, but go on.
It's just how I talk, I think.
That's how I do. I just interrupt you, but go on.
That's okay. That's how the outro
it.
takes 20 minutes to do. Because Ricky keeps going, hey, did you say it like this? Did you mean to say it like that? Hey. Okay, I'm done. Oh, hey, did you?
We're all having fun here. I'm having fun.
Hey, by the way, have you gotten the show yet?
No.
What the hell's wrong with you?
So here's the thing.
See, this is what happens. This one was on me, though.
So I've had a run of games. So starting back in October, Spider-Man, into Assassin's Creed, into God of War, into Kingdom Hearts, into The Division, into Days Gone. I've had a string of games, and it's been one after another.
Doesn't sound like you're playing enough.
Keeping my time. Well, now that I finished Days Gone, and I platinumed it. I have no game to play.
Don't know what that means.
So platinum trophy is like the best trophy you can get in the game.
Oh, congratulations. I'm really happy for you.
Because I care
When's
about
the party?
PlayStation trophies. But now my big choice is, do I spend the money on MLB The Show, or do I go back and play World of Warcraft? That's what I'm
Why would you play World
of
of Warcraft? How boring.
Because it's fun.
Go play the show. It's fun.
Maybe. But I also looked at The Last of Us, because The Last of Us is only $20. And that'll take my time for a little bit. But the main question is MLB The Show, World of Warcraft. So that's kind of my decision right now.
It doesn't sound like a hard one to me. Well, now that will wrap it up for us today.
Brian's like, yeah, I don't want to talk about after that. After you said wow over MLB The Show.
Yeah, come on. I've never played World of Warcraft, but I don't need to.
It's not your game. It's
okay.
I
know it's not.
It's totally not your game, and that's fine, Brandon.
I know it's not. Well, that will do it for us today. Again, if you want to support this podcast or any other podcast on MVP, head over to patreon.com and become a patron for just $1 a month. You can help support, and we certainly appreciate all the support that we get. So that will do it for us today. For Ricky Widmer across the table, I am Brandon Swanson saying so long, everybody, and have a great rest of your week. Take care.